using. It has to be some permutation combination of the keyboard. So sooner or later, your password will get cracked. So that is what brute force attacks are all about. Another very common strategy to find out somebody else's password, which is becoming very popular in India, is shoulder surfing. Shoulder surfing is a technique where the criminal will stand just behind you and he'll wait for you to log into your account, and while you're typing the password, since he's standing behind you, he will be keeping a track of all the keys that you're pressing on your keyboard, and that's how he'll actually try to find out what your password is. So that technique is called shoulder surfing, when somebody is standing just behind you to kind of find out what your password is. Another very interesting technique, which is slowly becoming very popular in India, is actually dumpster diving. Dumpster diving is a technique in which the criminal will go through your garbage, like literally your garbage, and he'll actually try to find sensitive data like passwords, bills, receipts, your income tax return papers, or some confidential data that you just threw away without realizing that somebody can actually go through your dumpster or go through your rubbish and try to find something very confidential about you. So you got to be very careful how you dispose your confidential data or documents or files. You can buy a paper shredder so that it gets shredded completely and nobody can perform dumpster diving against you. So you had password guessing, dictionary-based attacks, brute force attacks, shoulder surfing, dumpster diving. The next technique is something known as social engineering attacks. Social engineering attacks. Social engineering attack is a type of attack that allows a criminal to find out the password of the victim. It is an attack where the attacker uses his social skills to manipulate unsuspecting victims into revealing sensitive information, passwords, and other data that they normally would never reveal to anybody else. So typically, criminals will collect bits and pieces of harmless sensitive data from unsuspecting victims, which they put together to make it very dangerous. Actually, let me give an example of social engineering attacks so that all of you can understand what it is all about. So the first type of social engineering attack is a storytelling attack. So typically in a storytelling attack, what will happen is, I will actually pretend to be, say, an employee of your company, and I'll call you up. Say you're working for, say, a particular company. I will pretend that I'm working for the same company, and I'll call your office landline number. And I'll say that, oh, I've just recently joined the company, and, my boss, we have the same boss. He's asked me to prepare a particular presentation, but unfortunately, I accidentally deleted the important Excel file. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble. Can you please forward that important Excel file to my email address? So that is a sob story, where basically I'll pretend that I'm in trouble, and I'll pretend that the boss will fire me. I'll pretend that the boss is going to get very upset with me, and I'll ask you for your help. If you fall for the trick, you'll actually send me the Excel file. And reality is that I'm not even an employee in the company, and you should not be sharing that confidential Excel file with me. So that's a classic example of a social engineering attack. So a social engineering attack, there is no software, there is no programming, there is no technical stuff. It is all your own social skills, your own convincing skills, your own persuasion skills, which come into the play. If you're good at it, you can pretend to be something else, you can pretend to be in a difficult situation, and you can get people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. You can get people to reveal things that they should not be revealing, and you can actually get people to share something very confidential with you that they should not be sharing. So the example that I gave you was a sob story where you try to get sympathy from the victim. But the reverse is also possible where, well, not the reverse, but the other extreme is also possible where instead of getting the sympathy of the victim, you attack the victim. So you call up the victim saying that, oh, I just spoke to your boss and he told me that you are supposed to complete the presentation and you have not sent it to me yet. And I'm going to meet the investors, I'm going to meet the most important customer, the biggest customer that we have in 20 minutes, and I have not received the presentation. So please send it to me right now itself. So he will attack you, he will shout at you, he'll try to scare you. That, oh, you are going to, I'm going to complain to the management about you, I'll complain to the senior boss about you, please send me the presentation right now itself. And if you do not think, if you do not check his credentials, if you do not bother to verify whether the other person is an actual employee or not, you may get scared into revealing something that you should not have revealed to them. So that is an example of an attack story. So we have discussed soft story and an attack story. So let me quickly just go through these 3 steps of a storytelling attack, which is part of social engineering attacks. So step 1, the criminal does a lot of prior research to collect enough information about the victim or the victim organization or the victim company that allows him to create a story that increases the chances of the victim revealing some sensitive information to the criminal. Typically, the criminal will prepare the background story, find out some names and designations of real people involved, and also find out answers to typical questions that he may expect the victim to ask. Typically, there are 2 types of stories. You have soft stories and attack stories. In soft stories, you're trying to get the sympathy of the victim. And so you'll say something like, oh, I'll get into a lot of trouble. I've just joined. I don't want to lose my job. I keep making so many mistakes. My boss is already upset with me. Something like that. Or you use the attack story, where the criminal will attack you and try to scare you. So they use scare tactics. Oh, I'm going to complain about you to the management. Your boss is already very upset. You will lose your job if you don't do this. So things like that. Step number 3 is the criminal actually performs the attack. He pretends to be a colleague, boss, the police, a bank, a customer, and then performs the attack. And if the victim does not think about it, if the victim is not careful, he'll fall for the trick. Another type of social engineering attack is a very interesting attack known as IVR phone attack. In IVR phone attack, what happens is the criminal will send a spoofed email to the victim, and the email will look as if it has been sent by the bank. So basically, the criminal spoofs an email, sends an email from customer service at, say, ICICIbank.com to the victim. Victim opens the email, and the email says that your ATM card will be deactivated if you do not verify the below details. Or your bank account will be temporarily deactivated if you do not verify the following details. And there will be a phone number mentioned in that email. So the victim will get scared, and the victim will pick up their phone and call that phone number. And when they call that phone number, the same music that normally plays when you call your bank will be playing. The same IVR, which is the interactive voice response system. The same commands will be running, press 1, press 2, press 3, and so on. And then you'll finally speak to somebody. And that person will ask you for your account information, your TPIN or your telephone password and things like that. And you'll put it in. And he'll say, okay, thank you so much. You have verified your account. We will not close down your account. Thank you. And then he'll keep the phone down. And you'll be happy that, okay, thank God my ATM card or my bank account is not going to be deactivated. But in reality, what has happened is that the phone number that was mentioned in the email was a fake phone number. Because a lot of people, they don't store their bank phone number on their mobile. So in the email came from customer service at ICICIbank.com, a spoofed email. Email has the same logo as the bank. Everything looks like a real email. It looks like a real email. So you call up the number mentioned in the email, thinking that you're going to call the bank. But actually the number is fake or false. And when you call that number, you're not speaking to the bank, you're actually speaking to a criminal. And to continue the whole act, even when you call that number, the bank music, the same options, the same, press 1, press 2 and so on will be playing. So you'll still think that you're talking to a bank. So that's another social engineering attack known as IVR phone attack. The next example of a social engineering attack is call from technical support attack. So in this case, in this scenario, what happens is that you go to office, you're doing your work on your desktop, in your cubicle in your office, and suddenly your phone rings, your landline, the office desk phone. So you pick it up, and the person on the phone will tell you that, oh, I'm calling from the IT department, we are based out of Bangalore, and we were getting complaints that your internet speed is slow. So is it still slow? And generally in India, the internet speed is always slow. So even if it is not slow, when you have picked up the phone and if they ask you, is the internet connection slow? You might say, yeah, it is still slow. Just yesterday I was facing the problem, even today there's a problem. So you'll say, don't worry, let me remote desktop or remotely connect to your computer and let me fix the problem for you. And for me to connect to your computer, please do the following. So you might actually fall for the trick. You might be happy that, oh, my internet connection speed will increase. So you'll type some commands on your computer, which basically gives that person access to your computer. But what you don't realize is that the person who has called you, the person who is pretending that he's going to fix your IT problem, the person who is pretending to be from the IT department in Bangalore is actually a criminal who does not work in your company. So that's another classic example of call from technical support social engineering attack. The next example is actually one of my favorite examples of a social engineering attack. It's known as the bait attack. Try this out in your college or company and you'll be surprised how effective this attack is. Basically, you need to take a CD or a pen drive. You install a Trojan on it, go to the restroom and just leave the CD or pen drive in the restroom. Within an hour, the CD or pen drive will be taken away by somebody else. I guarantee you that. And what will happen is a lot of people, they'll steal the CD or pen drive and they'll take it home and they'll connect it to their computer out of curiosity to see what's there in the CD or pen drive. Maybe you can put the CD in a very tempting looking cover. I think all of you know what I'm talking about. Put the CD in a tempting cover. Now 100% somebody will steal it. They'll take it home, put it into their computer, and what that CD or pen drive actually has is a Trojan. And you'll have successfully managed to infect the computer. So that's a bait attack where you can use a CD or pen drive to infect somebody else's computer using a malicious software or a Trojan without them realizing what you're doing. So social engineering attacks are commonly used by criminals to steal passwords, to kind of steal confidential data, or to cause other types of damage to the victim. So what are the solutions, what are the countermeasures that are available to protect against social engineering attacks? First of all, you need to identify sensitive data and risk areas and inform employees about them. You need to train employees and identify identity of the person. So you got to train your employees and tell them to identify the identity of the person requesting sensitive data, and only then they should be sharing the data. You can train employees to politely refuse in case the identity of the person is not really available. You can have a company-wide policy for most common social engineering attacks, and you should also be doing surprise random checks so that you can check to see whether your employees are implementing the proper solutions and countermeasures against social engineering attacks or not. So that is what social engineering attacks are all about, and that is how you can fight them on the internet. So we've already seen a wide variety of different password cracking attacks. you started with you started with password guessing, then you went on to dictionary-based attacks, then you went on to brute force attacks, then you went on to social engineering attacks, you also had shoulder surfing, and then you had dumpster diving, and then you also had social engineering attacks, right? So now the final type of attack, or another type of attack which is commonly used by criminals, is default passwords. Now, default passwords are actually a very interesting way of bypassing security and gaining access to data, files, or computers that criminals are normally not supposed to be able to access. So what exactly are default passwords? Now, every manufacturer, be it a software developer or a computer hardware manufacturer, will actually keep some default passwords enabled on their software or on their device or hardware, such that in case the system administrator forgets the actual password, there is a backdoor entry available for them. So that was the original purpose of default passwords. However, with the passage of time, default passwords were leaked onto the internet, and then criminals across the world would start misusing default passwords as a method to bypass security and bypass the need for a password and gain access to data, devices, systems, and hardware that they should not otherwise have gotten access to. So there's a very interesting website which I like to show to all of you. It's called defaultpassword.us. Defaultpassword.us basically has a variety of different default passwords based on their different manufacturers, model numbers, and so on. So let me quickly open up the website. The website address is defaultpassword.us, and if all of you look at the screen, if you look at the left-hand side column, based on various manufacturers, there are default passwords available. So you have Dell passwords, ZTE passwords, Linksys passwords, Netgear, D-Link, and so on. So just select the manufacturer, then select the model number, and you'll be able to see the default passwords of a variety of different hardware, computers, devices, and so on. Yet another way of finding out somebody else's password, which we have not discussed so far, is actually through data sniffing. Data sniffing. So what exactly is data sniffing? Now, imagine that you and I are on the same network. Maybe we work for the same company, or maybe we are studying in the same college. You open a browser in your computer, and you connect to your bank, and you type your username and password. Now, the username and password has to leave your computer, travel through the network that you and I are in, and then go to the internet, and then it reaches the bank server. Now, as the data is transmitting, or as the data is traveling from your computer to the router and then the internet, it is on the same network as me. So if I run a data sniffer on my computer, I can actually record all data packets being sent or received across the entire network by all the users. And just in case your connection is not secure, if your connection is not SSL encrypted, then I could actually use a data sniffer to record your plain text passwords. And some very useful tools that allow you to perform data sniffing are the following. You have sniff pass and wire shark. Sniff pass and wire shark. So if all of you look at the screen, I like to actually share with you a screenshot of the sniff pass data sniffer. This is what it typically looks like. Sniff pass is available as a free download on the internet from nichesoft.net, and what it does is that you basically run this software, and the next time a user is connecting to a website and types in a username password, and if the connection is not secure, if the connection is not encrypted, the sniff pass software will be able to sniff out the password and display it on the screen. So if all of you look at the screen, the username is demo and the password is password, which has been recorded by the sniff pass software. Another example of a similar data sniffer that allows you to steal somebody else's password is Smart Sniff. Smart Sniff. It's available as a free download on the internet. So up until now in today's lecture, we have actually seen a variety of different ways in which passwords can be cracked. We started off by discussing password guessing, which is not really a technique yet. Everybody uses it. Then we discussed dictionary-based attacks, then brute force attacks, and then we moved on to shoulder surfing, dumpster diving, default passwords, and data sniffers. So these are the different ways in which, or the different techniques in which passwords can be cracked. We also discussed social engineering attacks, which in itself has 2-3 other sub-techniques of hacking into somebody else's password or getting somebody else's password. Now that we know all these different techniques, I like to actually share with all of you specific passwords and how we can actually crack them. Now from the time you switch on your computer till the time you switch off your computer, there are a variety of different types of passwords that we are asked to enter at all sorts of levels or all sorts of stages. The moment you start your computer, you have a BIOS password. If you don't know what a BIOS password is, if you've never used a BIOS password, restart your computer, and even before Windows boots, look carefully at the screen. There will be something called BIOS, or there will be a message that says press F1, F10 or F11 or something to enter the BIOS. So the BIOS is actually a very important component of your computer, which basically controls how your computer boots, which drive it boots from, what hardware devices are connected or enabled on it, and things like that. Now a lot of system administrators like to password protect the BIOS, because if the BIOS is not password protected, people can actually boot from another operating system, people can boot from a CD and then crack the Windows login password and things like that. So the first type of password that we're going to discuss today and then see how we can crack it is BIOS passwords. Now typically BIOS passwords are enabled so that people cannot or criminals cannot access the BIOS and change the settings. Now the BIOS password is normally stored on a CMOS chip, which is present inside the CPU of your desktop. So if you are a criminal and if you find that there is a BIOS password on the victim's computer, all you need is a screwdriver. So you take a screwdriver, open or unscrew the screws on the CPU and look for a CMOS chip. If you have no idea what a CMOS chip looks like, make sure that you do a quick Google search before you try to open the CPU of the victim. And typically, this is what the CMOS chip looks like. There are plenty of images available here. And once you understand what a CMOS chip looks like, now unscrew the screws from the victim's CPU, look for the CMOS chip, unplug it, remove the CMOS chip, and wait for maybe 30-40 seconds. What will happen is the moment you unplug the CMOS chip, the power supply to it, which normally comes from the battery in the CPU, will actually get disrupted. And since there is no power supply, the CMOS chip will forget the password. And the password gets reset or removed or forgotten. And now you plug back the CMOS chip, close the CPU, screw the, using the screwdriver, screw the screws in, and then start the computer again. And this time, when you try to go to the BIOS, it will actually not ask you any password at all. As simple as that. So cracking the BIOS password is very old-fashioned. You don't need some high-tech software for it. You just need a screwdriver. However, imagine that the victim's computer is a laptop instead of a desktop. What do you do in such a scenario? If it's a laptop, then I don't really recommend unscrewing the screws and opening the body of the laptop up and looking for CMOS chips and all that. Instead, you can use a very interesting software